Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about 7 moves I'm trying to make in my own fantasy football leagues before the week begins. We're talking buys, sells, stashes, cuts, starts, and sits. A little bit of something for everybody. And you can check out the time codes if you'd like to go to a specific part of the video. Let's start with some trade fours. We'll bring some positivity. All right. The grass is greener on the opposite side of these weeks for starting off with Rome Odunze. I do think Rome Odunze is a great buy low right now, but honesty is important. Transparency is important. There's no way around it. Rome Odunze has been awful for fantasy football since the bye week. I mean, that's just a fact. All right. From weeks 1 to 4, he was averaging over 17 points per game. In the last 2 weeks, 4.1 points per game. I believe that's half PPR format from Yahoo there. You can even see concerning trends like his first read target rate. I mean, it's gone down since the bye week. Before the bye week, right up there, high 20s, early 30s. But since the bye week, 17 and 19%. But I think there's some important context to those matchups in fantasy football, right? For example, when we look at week 6 versus Washington, yes, he only had 5.2 fantasy points. He had 5 targets, caught 2 of them for 32 yards. Not a great day in fantasy football. But what you have to keep in mind is that his touchdown that he had in that game was called back to a really silly offensive flag, okay? So what he actually had was 3 catches over 40 yards and a touchdown. That would have been a much better fantasy day. And then they weren't in a situation where they could really throw the ball in Washington because the weather was so bad. That's why you saw Jaden Daniels and JCM have fumbles in that game. Then in week number 7 against the New Orleans Saints, he comes out there, 6 targets, only 2 catches for 31 yards. Well, again, I want you to think about that game against New Orleans. There was not a single moment where the Bears needed to throw the ball. They just didn't. So in a game where the Bears had no incentive to throw the ball, he had 6 targets. That's like glass half full instead of glass half empty, in my opinion. But in my opinion, great chance to bounce back in these next 2 weeks, right? He's got the Ravens this week, which are the 4th best matchup for your wide receiver. Then the Bengals, that should be a high-scoring affair now with Joe Flacco. Then in week 10, he gets the Giants. The Giants are a top 10 matchup for your fantasy wide receiver as well. And let's not let just 2 weeks completely jade our opinion of Rome Odunze this entire season. This year, he still has a higher utilization rate than names like Zay Flowers and Cortland Sutton, Ladd McConkey, A.J. Brown, names that you're starting each and every week. Here are some real trades that have happened in real fantasy football leagues. We have an awesome database on the Flock Fantasy website where we can see real trades that have happened in real leagues. These are not hypotheticals. These are real trades. So, for example, in a 12-team start 9, someone sent away Alec Manor and DK Metcalf for Rome Odunze. Perfect. I love that as a buy low. How about packaging one of these flexible names off the waiver wire that are their value is going to go down over the course of the year, like Kendrick Bourne with a Michael Pittman to go get a Rome Odunze? How about sitting a T. Higgins for Rome Odunze? These are trades that I really love as buy lows. Okay, yes, I do have this player in the Flock Fantasy League, but I do believe he's a great buy low right now. That is Mr. Batman Bucky Irving himself. It has been so incredibly painful as a Bucky owner to just wait on him because you thought maybe it would be 1 week, then 1 week turned into 2, and then you were like, well, certainly he plays this week because otherwise they would have put him on IR, right? Well, no, he's coming back after the bye, right? In week 10, he'll be back. But I want you guys to remember how dominant he was before he went down with that injury. Don't forget who Bucky is. From weeks 1 to 4, before the injury, he had a higher utilization rate than every running back in the NFL not named Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson. He had a better utilization rate than the Jonathan Taylors, Achans, Barkley, Gibbs, Javantes, James Cook, Josh Jacobs of the world. He also had 71% of the team's designed rushing attempts and an elite offense with Tampa Bay, as well as a 15% target share. A 15% target share. I mean, this team is going to continue to feature him out of the backfield. When he's back, he'll be one of their best weapons. So now is a great chance to buy a great running back that's going to win you your fantasy leagues for an affordable price. I guarantee you week 10, when he's ready to go, after the bye, you're not going to get him cheap. So now is the time. And even right now, I'm not telling you you're going to get him for pennies, but pay whatever his price is. So for example, again, real trades that have happened in real leagues. In a 12-team start 7, someone sent away DeAndre Swift. That makes sense for the guy who's getting DeAndre Swift if he's a team that desperately needs to win in the next 2 weeks. Take advantage of that type of situation. sending away Jalen Warren for the same rationale? How about sending away Brian Thomas and Alvin Kamara to go get Bucky and T-Mac? If people are like, well, Kendra Miller went down, Kamara should be more valuable. True, but go get guys that you like better like Bucky. How about sending Alvin Kamara and Quentin Johnston for Bucky Irving? These are trades that I really, really like. Okay, so we were positive there for a second. Now we have to just get slightly negative. These are two players that I don't hate. I don't think they're terrible. I don't think they're bad, but I would prefer to send them away in fantasy football right now. Starting off with Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne has really had like a theme throughout his career where he started off seasons really well, and you started to see like a tail off in his production towards the end of the year, right? You can see that in 2022. You can see that in 2023. I mean, if we go to the Flock site and we use a player comparison tool, you'll see this is 2023, his best season in fantasy football, weeks 1 to 8, and then they had the bye week. And after the bye week, you saw a massive fall off in fantasy production, both efficiency, total yards, as well as like utilization, right? My concern with Travis Etienne is we've seen that kind of trend multiple times in his career. And I do have some concern that this team probably wants to get Bashul Tutin more and more involved. I know that might be silly. If you disagree, then don't move Travis Etienne. But I do think Bashul Tutin's a very effective player, a very dynamic, explosive player, and I would anticipate them wanting to get him more involved. So if you can move Travis Etienne, if you need a receiver for a Cortland Sutton like someone did here, if you can package him with another depth piece for a huge upgrade in Devon Achane, beautiful. If you can move Travis Etienne for George Pickens if you need a wide receiver, those are the type of trades I would love to see happen in your leagues. Okay. Again, don't hate this name. I just think it's time to trade him away if you can. Stephon Diggs. Look, here's the deal with Stephon Diggs. I say this as someone who was pretty high on Stephon Diggs before the year. He was one of those veterans that I was auto-clicking when he was on the board in the 7th round. But I just think there are too many mouths to feed in New England. I just don't think on any given week, you're going to know which wide receiver is going to score the most fantasy points. And on a week-to-week basis, that's really frustrating to be a part of, right? You saw this trend from weeks 1 to 5 where we started to see Stephon Diggs really getting ramped up. And we thought, oh, wow, what could the ceiling be, right? You see the snap share going up, the target share going up. And then we've kind of seen it plateau. We've kind of seen it plateau a little bit. I'm not saying he's not their best receiver. I'm not saying he's not going to be involved. But you have plenty of weeks where Kayshon Booty himself, right? Back-to-back weeks where he scores a touchdown. But even his target share isn't completely solidified. Then you have weeks where randomly Demario Douglas might pop off and 7 targets in week 1, then a touchdown in week 6 against the Saints. He's going to have certain games where he's important. Hunter Henry is also a great weapon for them not out of the backfield, but in the short to intermediate game, the same type of role that Stephon Diggs has right now. So I just think there are too many weapons on a week-to-week basis that they're competing with. And if they start to use Travion Henderson as a receiving weapon as well, I'm concerned. If you can get out at these prices like these people have done in real trades, like Jordan Addison, I would love that. Let's go get a Jordan Addison. If you can get out and get into an Alvin Kamara. If you have a Diggs and you want to get a running back, you're really weak at running back, try and go get an Alvin Kamara. How about packaging Diggs with a name like Romeo Doubs to upgrading to a Pickens? I would rather be a part of that offense. All right, let's talk about a player that, in my humble opinion, I do think you should probably be looking to bench in week number 8. That is Ramondre Stevenson. Now, if you guys have been watching the channel religiously, then you'll know last week on our players to start video, we featured him. We said he's a great desperation flex against Tennessee. We're not worried about Travion Henderson. It's a great matchup. So this is not some sort of bias here, but the Browns are the worst matchup for your fantasy running back. This year, they've given up the 4th fewest rushing yards per game, the fewest yards per carry allowed at 3.3, and the fewest total yards allowed per game. We have seen plenty of weeks where Ramondre Stevenson has busted, even with a ton of opportunity, right? How about against the New Orleans Saints in week 6? How about against Buffalo, which is a great matchup, in week 5? He had 2 touchdowns. 12 of his points of his 14 came from touchdowns, right? So you've seen plenty of weeks where he's busted. The Browns held Derrick Henry to 2.1 yards per carry. Josh Jacobs to 1.9 yards per carry. David Montgomery to 1.3. This is a legit rushing defense, and I would rather start other names like Alvin Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Warren, Dobbins, and Swift You know, a lot of people don't know this, but there's a free feature on the Flock Fantasy site called the My Teams feature where you can see expert consensus opinion on your league and your fantasy team. If you want to get that feature for free, then go to the Flock Fantasy site and create a free account, but make sure you use the promo code LAND, LAND, so you can access that feature. You can actually check out that pinned comment down below. It'll direct you towards the site, but it's just one of those free, kind of like secret weapons that you have in fantasy football this year that not a lot of people know about. So check that out. Okay, let's go to my next benching. I think you can maybe save your week potentially if you bench the 49er wide receivers at the Houston Texans. This is the worst matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. When you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, that's 4 for 4 who does that, by the way. The Texans defense give up the 5th fewest passing yards per game, the 4th fewest total yards per game, and the lowest points allowed to opposing offenses. They're giving up about 14 points per game, 14, 15 points per game. And this really just comes down to one factor for me with the San Francisco wide receivers. How in the world, if you're in a desperate spot, I get it. You can play one of these names. But how in the world are you going to decide who to start? Each and every week, it feels like it's a different name. So from weeks 5 to 6, people were like, well, clearly it's Kendrick Bourne, right, guys? Clearly it's Kendrick Bourne. He had 142 yards in back-to-back weeks. Next week, 14 receiving yards. And then it was Juwan Jennings, right? Juwan Jennings last week, 31 receiving yards, 7 targets. He was the most utilized receiver. The week before that, he was completely uninvolved. And now you have to account for George Kittle, who had no receiving yards last week or receptions. That should change this week. He's one of the better receiving tight ends in the league. There's just too many things to account for, even without Ricky Pearsall, even without Brandon Ayuk. So I would rather start these names if you have them. I get it if you're in a tough spot and you have to throw these guys out there. But if T. Higgins, Waddle, Wandale, Diggs, Dobbs, Matthew Golden, or Tez Johnson are available, as far as like on your team, I know they're not on the waiver wire, then you should go ahead and play them, in my opinion. Okay, here is a name. We go from a negative to a positive that I have a ton of confidence in this week. That is a combo. It's a duo. It's Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton versus the Cowboys. The Cowboys are the best matchup for your quarterback and wide receivers. They give up the most passing yards, the most total yards allowed per game, and they give up almost 30 points to opposing offenses. Plenty of wide receivers have completely obliterated this secondary, and plenty of quarterbacks have obliterated the secondary as well, including Russell Wilson, who had over 470 yards and 3 touchdowns when he played this team. Yeah, that's the same Russell Wilson that's now benched, okay? This is tied for the highest over-under of the week. The Broncos had the 4th highest implied team point total of the week. Bo Nix is great when trailing, so even if the Cowboys are up in this game with their elite offense, he has had a 76% adjusted completion rate when trailing this year. 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, 101 plus passer rating. He made history last week, the first player in NFL history with 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in the same quarter, in the 4th quarter. Crazy. I'm projecting both of those guys to finish top 6. Okay, let's go to some cuts. These are players that I believe you can cut from your roster, free your mind, and you can yell at me later if I'm wrong. But Justin Fields, here's the deal with Justin Fields. If he's healthy this week, he might face the Cincinnati Bengals. Not if he's healthy, but if Tyrod isn't healthy. But there's a good chance he's benched, and then he has a bye week. What is the reason to hold at that point, right? I just don't know why you would hold. Kyler Murray, if you need to free up space, well, he's on his bye week. He faces Dallas next week. So if you're in a larger league and you need to look at, the next week in advance, maybe you hold him because he plays Dallas. But with the bye week, he's not really been performing anyway. When he's healthy, he's a waiver wire option at this point. Joe Mixon. Now look, Joe Mixon, there's still no timetable for his return that was reported 2 days ago. I'm of the belief that we probably don't see him this year, but anything is possible. Here's the deal for Joe Mixon though. If you're in a small league and you have the Buymageddon and you need to drop him because you have another player that needs to take his spot on the IR, that is when you cut him. If he's on your IR and he's not taking up any space, you can go ahead and keep him. How about Kareem Hunt, who is slowly starting to lose more and more opportunities each and every week? They're starting to trust Pacheco and Brashard Smith more and more every single week. Michael Carter, you can also drop. We're dropping Michael Carter simply because he lost the first and second down role, and now he's on a bye, right? And then eventually Trey Benson will be back. You can also drop Kendre Miller, who tore his ACL, unfortunately. Luke McCaffrey, you're gone. The one chance where maybe you would start him against Dallas, didn't do anything. He's gone. Jordan Whittington, with Puka Nacua back after the bye week, no longer really useful at all. You can drop Michael Mayer because after the bye week, we anticipate Brock Bowers being back. You can drop AJ Barner because despite a couple games with a touchdown, he's just not involved enough through the air to be a weekly option. So what I've done with my DFS lineup this week is taken most of the names from today's video and created a lineup. For example, Cortland Sutton's our top player. We're giving him 2 times the points. We want to hit big on a Sutton-Dallas matchup. Derrick Henry, we're betting on the bounce back. Cam Scatterboo in Philadelphia. Breece Hall against that weak Cincinnati Bengals rush defense. Rome Odunze with the bounce back. And we got a little chalky with Emeka Egbuka there as well. You can create your own lineup. All you got to do is download the FastDraft app. Use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50. And then you're going to get my week 8 rankings completely free. You can check that out in the pinned comment if you want to have some fun this week. All right, we're going to end the video with a couple stashes I love before week number 8, starting off with Colston Loveland. So Cole Kmet has really, like, there's not a better way to say this, but he's been a cock block for Colston Loveland. He really has. He played over 90% of the snaps in the first 4 weeks of the season. That led Colston Loveland to just being completely irrelevant in fantasy football. Now, here's the good news for Colston Loveland. Number 1, Cole Kmet, when he was healthy, played only 52% of the snaps in week 6 after the bye. And now he's probably going to miss this week with the back injury, which means Colston Loveland against the Baltimore Ravens has a chance to finally put his name on the map. And I think if the genie gets out of the bottle, there's no putting him back. Such a talented receiving threat. Okay, last name here, Isaiah Davis. This is simply betting on if Breece Hall either misses this week or if he's traded, then I don't care that the Jets suck, guys. I don't care that their offense isn't good. If Breece Hall is traded, Isaiah Davis will be the number 1 pickup on waiver wires. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay? It's so hard to find a starting running back in fantasy football this week or this year. So if you have the starting running back, which is what Isaiah Davis would be for any NFL team, that will automatically be interesting to people. And whether you use him in fantasy or you trade him, he will be a more valuable asset next week than he is this week. Guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button and show some love. Subscribe if you liked any of the content today. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app. Use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.